Okay, so the latest on what is now Tropical Storm Francine. That system that we were talking about yesterday as PCT6 has now become better organized. Now Tropical Storm Francine. What has changed since yesterday? PTC6 is now Francine. Also importantly, the forecast track has shifted east. So yesterday we talked about two scenarios. One, a more westward track closer or into the coastline, the other more east and away. And the more east track is becoming more apparent now. So this suggests lesser impacts for southeast Texas and more direct severe impacts for Louisiana. Even with the more east track, we are still expecting minor to moderate storm surge flooding for portions of the coastline, and we'll talk about that. Marine areas beyond 20 nautical miles especially will also be impacted with high winds, and there will be elevated seas in the marine areas. We do have a coastal flood warning that's recently been issued in effect starting Tuesday night, and I'll show you the map for that in a moment. For the land areas, as far as the wind warnings, tropical storm and hurricane watches have been issued for areas east of High Island, so not including our local forecast area. There are tropical storm force watches also in effect for our coastal water zones 20 to 60 nautical miles offshore. We do have better confidence compared to yesterday in the track as the center is getting better organized, but we still will need to monitor for any track changes. A shift closer to the coast would bring those tropical storm force winds at least into the area. Here's a look at the cone and watches and warnings that were issued at 10 a.m. this morning. You can see now southeast Texas, at least our portion of the area, not in the cone. So what does that mean? The center of the system is less likely to track into our area directly. So that concern for hurricane force winds has subsided dramatically. And you can see the tropical storm watches rather, highlighted along the coast in yellow, east of High Island, over to Cameron, Louisiana. The pink line indicates a hurricane watch for the Louisiana coast over to Grand Isle. And again, so the land-based tropical storm headlines are not in our area. They are east of our area based on this more eastward track. Francine still forecast to become a hurricane over the next 24 to 48 hours. So expect some strengthening from where it is now, which is now a sustained 50-mile-per-hour tropical storm. Here's a close-up look at where we have tropical storm watches and hurricane watches in pink, tropical storm watches more in the rose color there, orange color. Again, we still have marine winds in the tropical storm force area potentially off the coast, but not thinking for Galveston Bay or the coastal areas. The hurricane watch concern a bit further east, and you can see that laid out there on this map. For Galveston Bay, we do have a small craft advisory, Matagorda Bay as well, and coastal waters south of Freeport. So the winds will be elevated. They will be gusty, but not quite tropical storm force in those areas. Here's a look at the satellite loop from this morning. You can see those thunderstorms really blossoming down near the center of circulation where we had several areas of thunderstorms and convection. So again, starting to become demanding satellite image. Here's a look at the wind probabilities. As I said, the tropical storm watches, are not in our land areas, not in our counties. But there are still some scenarios that would bring those winds in. So we're going to have to watch for any sort of track changes. This map does show about a 30 to 50% chance of some tropical storm force winds along the immediate coast, dropping off dramatically inland. If we were to get these level winds, they would arrive Tuesday night into Wednesday morning. Looking at the probabilities for 58 mile per hour sustained winds, you can see here the chances are much lower. Sometimes we'll use this as a proxy for power outages. And so for this level of sustained winds, you can see the focus is much more on Louisiana, although there are some very low probabilities on our northern coastal areas. And then for the hurricane force wind probabilities, again, you see the focus is even more so on Louisiana coast. Talking about storm surge, coastal flooding now. These are the latest forecasts from the National Hurricane Center Storm Surge Unit. You can see for areas north of Freeport over to High Island and including Galveston Bay, we're looking at 1 to 3 feet of storm surge for those areas. This corresponds to water levels up around 4 to 5 feet above mean lower low water. So, we've seen some of these levels before with Alberto and Beryl, and these correspond to minor to moderate coastal flooding. So even with the more eastern track, we still get an elevated water and some high seas, a bit of a wave run-up setup situation. So we can still have issues even though the track is more easterly. But if you look not too far to the east, we're talking about 3 to 5 feet of surge and even 5 to 10 feet of surge for portions of the Louisiana coast. So much bigger concern out there. Focusing in again on the coastal flood warning that I just spoke of, you can see the counties that are included in that in darker green, and a coastal flood advisory south of the warning area, where we are looking at even potential for some minor coastal flooding there, but moderate coastal flooding again in the coastal flood warning areas. So we've been through a few storms that have had this before, so you have an idea what to expect. We would expect quite a bit of high surf as well and some beach erosion on the Gulf Coast beaches. Talking about the timing of storm surge now, we've got a couple of points to show, showing our storm surge model here. And what you see is fairly minor departures through the day on Tuesday, then things really pick up potentially Tuesday night and Wednesday morning. So that high tide coming in late Tuesday night, Wednesday morning looks to be the highest water levels. The spread there gives an idea of different scenarios. If you look at the mean there, the black line, about 4 feet above mean lower low water, but the high end of the range closer to 5 feet. So again, we do see minor to some moderate impacts at those levels. This is for Eagle Point. So this will be typical around Galveston Bay. The Galveston Bay entrance, much the same. The mean there over 4 feet, but the high end of the range a bit above 5 feet above mean lower low water. And you can see some of the impacts in the table below. Timing, once again, the same for Freeport, really starting with the high tides Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. That's the tide cycle we're most concerned about. Again, water levels 4 to 5 feet, and all these areas are in that coastal flood warning. So again, this is meant to show timing. Rainfall, this is a bit less than we were forecasting yesterday, again, based on that eastward shift in the track. And you can see now at the coast, perhaps for Bolivar, we're looking at 4 to 6 inches. Other coastal areas, probably more like 2 to 4 with the darker green, closer to 4 right at the coast, and then dropping off inland. City of Houston, looking at more like a couple of inches of rain. There will be a sharp cutoff on the west side, so But the bottom line is that the really heaviest amounts of rain look to be offshore and then over on into Louisiana. That's where the greatest flash flood threat is. And the flash flood threat continues here to be shown as far as our excessive rainfall outlooks for Tuesday on the left and Wednesday on the right. You can see the slight risk is really confined to the coastal counties, the areas you see in yellow. We do have a marginal risk even into Harris and the city of Houston. This is conditional based on some heavier downpours perhaps edging up into that area. But again, the highest rainfall offshore. And then on Wednesday, you can see that red area. That's where there's an even greater concern of flash flooding over into Lake Charles, on over through Louisiana, closer to the track of the hurricane. And we do have a slight risk in our southeast zones as well on Wednesday. Just a quick summary of marine impacts. I showed you the wind-related warnings out there now. We do expect this system now, Tropical Storm Francine, to be a hurricane by the time it crosses closest to our coastal waters. Timing Tuesday night and peaking during the day on Wednesday as far as the winds and seas. You can see more details there on the high winds. Sustained tropical storm at the peak of the event tomorrow. Some wind gusts possible up to near gale force in any kind of squalls out ahead of that. Plan right now for a landfalling hurricane Wednesday afternoon or evening, somewhere between the Texas-Louisiana border and or along the Louisiana coast. As is pointed out here, and we talked about yesterday, the forecast cone, not the skinny line in the middle, is what we should be looking at. So there is some still potential for deviation left or right, but less than what we were looking at yesterday. Finally, key takeaways. We now have Tropical Storm Francine. The track has shifted eastward, suggesting lesser impacts for southeast Texas and more direct severe impacts for Louisiana. That said, we still are looking at the potential for some minor to moderate coastal flooding along the coast and along Galveston Bay. As far as land areas are concerned, the wind-related watches are east of High Island and especially across the Louisiana coast. We do have higher confidence now as the center is just now becoming better organized, and all track models are in pretty good agreement, but we will need to continue to monitor, of course.